and we'll get started. I'd like to start out with a prayer, if that's okay. Anybody want to offer that prayer for us tonight? Anyone brave enough?
I'd be happy to do it.
Okay, Greg, thanks for that.
No problem. Our kind Father in heaven, we thank thee, Father, that we've been blessed with this opportunity, that we might be able to come together and be able to learn from each other, and that we might try to learn from thee and through thy Spirit, and ask that thy Spirit might be with us at this time to help inspire us and help us to understand the concepts that we're discussing, and that we might also be able to understand each other, so as we communicate with each other, we can do that effectively. Father, we ask that will bless all those who are suffering right now in the world, and all of us that are going through this COVID crisis, that we might be able to turn to thee, and we might be able to learn the lessons that are available to us at this time, and that by turning to thee, we might be able to overcome those challenges. And we ask that will bless and comfort those who are mourning and suffering at this time, and protect those who are also trying to help those who are suffering. Father, we thank thee for all things and ask for these blessings in thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Craig. That was awesome. Appreciate that. Anybody have a spiritual thought they want to share? A quick spiritual thought that might help us all out. Anybody got anything in their mind been thinking about recently? Maybe something from Come Follow Me, or I don't know, anything.
I'll bring up a conference talk if that's, sorry to speak twice on two
no,
things.
Greg,
but
that's awesome. You're like a one-man show tonight. I appreciate it.
Well, Brother Anderson on his talk, that was one of the most impactful talks for me at conference. It was finals. I was way behind. I was trying to go through and think, okay, well, here's how I'll kind of balance the conference and homework issue on that last Saturday.
Yeah.
And as I was listening, it was actually just before his talk. I was listening. I thought I need to sit and take some notes. And so Saturday went away from the computer for a moment and actually sat down on the couch and had the thought to start recording some impressions and miracles and just some things that just some thoughts that I had.
Yeah.
And so then I thought it was totally interesting. Right after that, as he came on, and his talk was talking about recording miracles.
Wow.
And I just started going through a chain of things, and it made sense that we're always looking for reassurance, especially at times like this when we're going through different things. We're like, just show me that you care, and we're fine. And sometimes it feels like those prayers don't get past the ceiling. But when you think back and you remember one thing, especially as I was recording it, just a chain of miracles and tender mercies came into place. And just like you said, once you start to do that, then the feelings come back. And so I thought it was just really wise to sit down and take the time to record those things, try to remember them, ponder them, and then right after that, I started saying, man, I haven't shared enough of this with my kids and my family. And so then turned around and tried to pass it on.
That's awesome. Wow. I needed that tonight. Thank you for that. I keep having these thoughts and also things I find online and read in the scriptures, and I've got to do the same thing. I've got to start recording more of that. So thanks for the reminder, Craig. That's awesome. It's a little bit like that song, Count Your Many Blessings, right? If you're down, you just start thinking about all the things you've been blessed with, and suddenly it kind of works you out of it. I think the same thing with writing down miracles and things, even just impressions of things that have shown the hand of the Lord in your life. Thanks for that. That was awesome. All right. Let's go over some things. Well, first, does anybody have any questions to start out? Anybody come with questions tonight? I've got the chat window open. You can throw it into the chat, or we can just talk about it. I see a bunch of you don't have your cameras on. That's fine. Maybe you're eating dinner.
Okay. What's the could we establish a like a Slack channel for this class? Would that be helpful?
If that's helpful for you guys, absolutely. I can set one up. What I kind of recommend you do is use Microsoft Teams. Anybody familiar with Teams? It's kind of,
I've used it in the past a little bit.
yeah. So it's kind of a, it's Microsoft's version of Slack, basically, if you think about it like that. Same concept and all that. But if I set one up, it allows me to just take your BYUI credential and just throw it in there for the team, for the class. And then you guys can use it to chat. You can, it also lets you upload files if there's files you want to share, that kind of thing. Oh, that's good to know. And in corporate America, Teams is used quite a bit now, just like Outlook for email, that kind of thing. So why don't we do that? I'll set that up tonight after the call and get you all invited. What you'll see is an invite email will come and ask you to join the Microsoft team for the class. And yeah, that's an awesome idea. Thanks for that, Mark. That's a good idea. You can also, of course, ask questions in iLearn. There's only one discussion board, as you've seen in here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over to this screen really quick. But over here, every week, there's a discussion board that points to the same discussion board. So it's not even broken out by week, but it's a place that you can ask and answer questions. Some of you guys have been out here already. If this starts to get really long, I can take and just break it into a different one for every week. So you've got this as an option, but I'm happy to create a Microsoft Teams as well. That's a great idea. Any other thoughts or questions or comments before we kind of go through week one's work? Okay, if you think of anything during the office hour, just bring it up. Just interrupt me. Okay, don't feel bad at all, and I'll be happy to step in. Really, this is your time to have some FaceTime with me. If you were taking this on campus, we'd have 3 hours a week, and with online, you have 1 hour, one office hour a week is usually what I do, and then any other time you need. What I do want to show you, if you ever need to set up some time with me, if you want to go over some questions one-on-one, just come over to iLearn, come down under your instructor here, click that link, and there's a link out to my Calendly. It's a website called Calendly, and I'll just show you what that looks like. You just click that link, and then schedule some time, and they're in 30-minute increments. If you click that, I've got times on Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning and the afternoon. I don't have any evenings available through this tool, but if evenings work better for you guys, just shoot me an email and say, hey, brother, think we meet, in the evening sometime, and I'll set up some time with you. I kind of share this with online and with our campus or remote students this semester, but usually from 9 to 11 in the morning and 2 to 4 Monday, Wednesday, Friday I have available. So definitely use that. And then there's a link out here to my Zoom. Obviously you guys found it, but you can use that and click that link, and that'll take you into the Zoom meeting as well. So don't hesitate to do that. I'm happy to meet with you. I've got time reserved, like I said, 4 hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for that. So if you do have questions on the course or you're stuck on some code, don't hesitate to schedule some time. And when you schedule through that website, I get an email, and it reserves that time for you. So we just jump on Zoom, and it's your time. Under week one, well, first of all, you'll kind of see this pattern going forward every week, right? You'll have other than this getting acquainted for this first week, you'll have a readings, you'll have a report every week, and then you'll have a team activity that you'll do. And as you saw, or as we've talked about, the team activity requires you to figure out a time when you can meet together. Okay, it needs to be a synchronous time where the three of you can meet together. I have set up teams, and let me see how you guys are doing. If you go to the people link in iLearn and you click on groups, you can see a list of all the groups. We've got, looks like that first group, a couple people have added themselves, which is awesome. Chris and Craig, good job. Just find a group that you want, and I think on your side, you'll see an add button over here, or join, and it lets you join a group. And it doesn't really matter to me how you want to do that. Just join a group. You'll hopefully have 3 in each group. And the idea that every week, starting next week, you'll have an assignment to do as a group. And what you'll do is you'll get on Zoom or whatever you want to use. One person will share their screen, and they'll kind of be in charge that week of driving the coding part of it, where the other 2 people can give input and the other person can code. And then when you're done after that 1 hour, just spend an hour synchronous. And then that person that's driving the code that week needs to send a copy of that code to everyone else on the group, so that you all 3 have the same code, but you have your own code repository. Okay, so we won't have a shared repository. And the reason is later you can go back on your own, and you can either finish the project if you guys didn't get done, or you can even do some of the stretch goals that are available on that. And that'll just be done individually. Okay, and then you'll submit a link to you'll link that to your repository, to your portfolio, which we'll talk about tonight as well. So definitely join a group. Try to get one joined by next week so that you guys can set up some time to meet next week and start going on the team assignment for next week. And they're just projects. They should take it a little close to an hour, hopefully. If they take more than that, no problem. Just stop after an hour, and let me just kind of show you for next week on the team activity. There's a link when you're done. After you spend an hour, then click on the link. Let me just kind of show you. There's a sample solution at the end of this. So like this one has you build an HTML file, create some buttons and do these things. And then you get through all of the requirements, the core requirements, 1, 2, and 3. And then you have these stretch goals. And if you can get through at least one of them, that's awesome. That'll give you the 2 points, the extra 2 points you get. And then you'll have this instructor solution that you can click here and you can see one idea of how this was accomplished from the sample. And the idea, one of the things that it has you do at the end of this assignment is you fill out a survey, and one of the questions is, did you compare your code with the instructor solution? Because by doing that, you get some other ideas. There's never one way to do things, right? There's 101 ways that are fine to do things. So the idea is just to get you thinking and maybe looking at some other code as well. So you'll do that. But anyway, that requires you to be in a team of 3. And then like it says in here, every week somebody else will be the driver. Designate one team member as the main driver and collaborate on their copy of the code. And then make sure everybody has a copy of that. And then the following week, switch who's in charge so that y'all, it kind of rotates every 3 weeks. You get a chance to be the driver for that team activity. Any questions on that, on the team activity and setting up the teams? Okay. As far as the textbooks, hopefully you guys have been able to find this stuff okay. This doing stuff with web things, let me open that up in another link here. It just links out to a GitHub repository. And you've got to scroll down and find right here. You just want to click this link and store it somewhere on your hard drive. And then that'll just be the PDF file that you use for that activity. It looks like you're finding it from what I'm looking at. There was a question on local storage. And yeah, I don't think it's right exactly where they told you. I think it's a little bit farther down in the reading. And that really is hopefully a review for you for this week. So under readings, it tells you to look at local storage and learn something about it there. On doing stuff with web things starts in section 2.3. And someone put a comment, it's actually farther down, and that's okay. Let me just open my copy up really quick and I'll show you. If I can find it here. I would just kind of do a search on local storage. That might be the fastest way to find it. And yeah, it's clear down here under the sample code right here. Yeah. So it's farther down anyway. Another idea for you, as far as learning about local storage, I would just go out to W3 Schools. This also gives you some idea about what that is. And you guys can use any reference you want in this class. We give you access to several books, recommendations, but it's really about learning the different topics. And so really, I don't care where you find those topics, wherever you find them is great for me. If you go over to W3 Schools, that's a great website. A lot of you probably have seen this before. And there's lots of things you can learn. If I click the drop down under tutorials, you'll see that there's lots of things you can learn. And one of them is under JavaScript. It talks in here about local storage. Let me see if it's in this top list here. I don't know if I'm going to find it. What I usually do is when I'm looking for it, I just go local storage, W3 Schools, and then it links me right to it. So I can click that and kind of read about local storage and how it works. And I'm happy to go over this tonight a little bit if we have time, and showing you just an example of how it works and whatnot. This is showing you how to set items in local storage and how to read them back, that kind of thing. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit about this today. There's also this creating a portfolio. I kind of wanted to spend some time on that tonight if we can, and talk about this activity. At the end of the semester, you're going to submit your portfolio, your final portfolio, but every week you actually submit a link to it with that week's reading. And so I was going to kind of go over that a little bit tonight. There's also a video you can watch out on SitePoint. And then this idea of turning in your notes every week. your notes or code examples. And so what we'll talk about tonight, let me show you a really quick VS Code. How familiar is everyone with VS Code? Have you guys used it before?
Yes.
Okay, it's a pretty common editor. In fact, if you come out, I talk about this a lot, but if you look at, there's a website called Stack Overflow, and it's a pretty popular website among programmers where you can go and ask questions or answer questions on them. They do a survey every year, and it basically allows people they ask you questions, right? What technologies are you using? Which ones do you want to use? What editors do you use? That kind of thing. The one for 2020 is currently underway, so we don't have results yet. But this right here, if you Google that, it'll show you the 2019 survey, and there were 90,000, developers that responded on here. And you can read through this on your own. It's actually kind of interesting. But if I come over to the technology link, I can see here that the most popular technologies for programming, scripting, and markup languages are what we call the 3 pillars of front-end development, right? HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And this is web front-end development too, right? So we really care about code that runs inside the browser. And you can see that that's the top skill set that the developers have, are these 3. So hugely important. But what I want to show you, if you come down, all of these things we look at as professors on campus, and we want to make sure that we're teaching the latest stuff that's being used. We have companies from industry come up and visit with us. We go visit them. Last spring, we went down to talk to Motorola down in Salt Lake City, Ancestry.com, of course, Family Search. We talk to them as well. But we try to stay in contact with industry to find out, okay, what is it that they want you to know so that you guys are ready for your jobs in the industry. And so one of the things that you'll see down here over, let me see if I can find it, development tools. You'll see right here that VS Code or Visual Studio Code, 50% of the developers use it in industry. And this is worldwide, 90,000 people that responded, right? So that's why we use it. It's a well-known, very common thing, and something really nice to have on your resume. I'll talk quite a bit about resumes and, hey, thinking just thoughts about your resume. But as students, right, I recommend that you typically have at least 3 sections on your resume. The first one is basically education, and that lists your degree that you're going after and when you expect to get it, right? The next one is maybe under skills, where you list out the skills that you have, and then maybe the third, your experience. And under your skills section, you can subdivide that and say, okay, under skills, I've got different categories like tools that I know, or languages that I know, or databases that I'm familiar with. And in this case, under tools, I would definitely put VS Code. And we call it VS Code instead of Visual Studio Code. And so you'll hear it referred to that quite a bit. Visual Studio is actually another tool it's a little bit more comprehensive, a little bit bigger download, takes up a lot more memory and that kind of thing. We do teach that class we do use that tool in a class called CIT 365 .NET software development, where we teach the C# language and we use the Visual Studio Code. I'm sorry, the Visual Studio, what we call an IDE, right, an integrated development environment. But anyway, we do use that. So if you don't have that installed yet, you can just come out to code.visualstudio.com, and that'll let you download it. Nice thing about this editor, it's lightweight, it loads really quick, and you can install it on any operating system. So Linux, Mac, or Windows, doesn't matter. You just click the download and run it, and you're good to go. Inside of that, yeah, of course, Craig.
Can I ask a question just about Visual Studio? Visual Studio's that's the kind of the paid parent of VS Code, isn't it? Or
yeah, you could think of that. So VS Code is kind of lightweight. It's more of just an editor, and then Visual Studio is a full-blown integrated development environment. It connects into like source control right from within that tool. It compiles languages that need compiling. It does refactoring. It does all kinds of really cool stuff. In fact, I can show it. Oh, go ahead.
Well, while we're students, is that something that, again, I'm just trying to think, I'd rather kind of still get my experience on some of those things before, because I just had other people I talked to why they haven't used it. They're like, oh, it's too expensive. It's funny, half the developers that I work with, they're all just on VS Code. But, if there's something we got access to it while we're here, then I'd probably want to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. Dang it, this is doing an update. I was going to show you, I've got a VM running, but let that finish. When it comes up, I'll show you. But here's what you can do. You've got 2 options actually with that. I'm going to code.visualstudio.com, right? But if I just go to www.visualstudio.com, that'll show you that you can actually download a community edition for free, Visual Studio. So that's a free option for you. When you go to download right here, you see it's community, professional, or enterprise. Community is a free edition. You can download it, no cost at all, zero. Okay, the other option that you have, if you want to go ahead and get the very best, this enterprise edition, as students, you guys have access to a portal on Azure. That's Microsoft's site. You just go to portal.azure.com like that. And then you have to log in as your student with your student credentials. And what you can do is up in this area up here, you type in education, and that loads up this education services. If you click that, and then you come over here to software, you actually have access to the full-blown Visual Studio. You also have access to Windows 10 and just a whole bunch of other things, 138 items here. And if I scroll down here to Visual Studio, you'll see that I've got access even for the Enterprise edition of 2019. When you first come into this portal, it's going to ask you to activate your student account. It's like a student thing that you have access to for 1 year from the time you activate it. And then once you have that activated, you can just click on software and then download this. If you go into that, it gives you a product key that you'll need to install once you download it and install Visual Studio. So for sure, that's an option. This is actually what it looks like. This is Visual Studio, the 2019 Enterprise Edition. See if there it goes. And like I said, we don't use this in this class. It's kind of a big tool for what we're trying to do. On the front end, we keep a little bit lighter, but by all means, it's a great tool. And if you know this as well, it's probably good to know. So it looks a little different than VS Code does, and it'll let you create all kinds of different projects. This uses a language by default called C#. C with a pound sign is how it's spelled. And with that language, you can build, desktop apps, console apps, web apps, mobile apps, even native mobile apps you can build for iOS and Android. So anyway, I won't talk more about that tonight probably, but there's all kinds of really cool stuff you can build with Visual Studio. And Craig, if you have questions later, let me know. There's actually an installer that lets you install this. And when you go to do that, it says, well, what kind of applications are you going to build? And you choose from a whole list of what they call workloads. And in those workloads, you can say, I want to target web, or I want to target mobile, or I want to target, different platforms and whatnot. So anyway, that's awesome. And there's also a version that runs on Mac as well. Okay, so I'm going to pop into VS Code really quick and kind of just show you some of this. If you're not used to VS Code, my guess is that most of you are familiar with it, but just in case you're not, the way this works is you start VS Code up, and you should always open a folder very first thing. So I'm going to come in and just open up a recent folder. I've got a folder called WDD 330 for this class, and I've got some files already in here, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of show you how I would start out if I were you. Okay, so come up with a folder where you're going to store your portfolio in this class. Okay, call it whatever you want to call it. And then what you want to do is once this opens up and you've got that folder open, you just right click and you create a new file. And the very first file you should try to create is this index.html file. And just as a review, your file and folder names should always be lowercase and all together with no spaces. Okay, so you can see in here I've got an index.html file. So you literally just right click in here. I'm going to create one called sample tonight just to kind of go through it with you. So if I type in sample.html and hit enter, as long as I give this an extension, it's going to help the editor know what I'm trying to build. Okay, so you always want to give your editor an extension of the file that you're working on. Okay, and on top of that, I usually create 3 subfolders. And if you've taken the 230 class, this should be familiar. But I usually create a subfolder for images to store all the images, one for scripts for all the JavaScript files, and one called styles for all the style sheets. And that way you kind of have your index page and you've got those other three files ready to go. And then what I recommend you do is also create a separate folder for every week, because every week you're going to be taking notes, you're going to be storing your code examples, you're going to be linking to your team project, the team assignment for that week, and you also have 2 different personal assignments that you do throughout the semester. You'll have a block 1 challenge and you'll have a block 2 challenge. So by the time you're done, your portfolio will have links to all of these things. Okay. Let me show you some cool things about VS Code. So here I am, and let's assume this is your index.html page, right? HTML5 document should always start out with a doc type, and it looks like that. and I can type that in like that if I want. And then you have an HTML tag. And I'm going to show you some built-in stuff that's kind of fun, but I don't have to start out with less than. I can just type in HTML and watch what happens when I hit tab or enter. It goes ahead and puts the tag inside of parentheses, inside of less than and greater than signs, angle brackets, we call them, right? And it adds a closing tag, all built in. So I just have to hit enter because it takes my cursor right to the center of those. And I know that each one has a head tag, and again, tab, and they have a body tag, right? And then I know inside of that, I've got some other tags. But let me show you a shortcut. When you're creating a brand new HTML file, I don't have to type all this myself. It's so common that you type all this in that I can just enter an exclamation mark. And when I do that, and if I hit tab or enter, it's going to build out a template for me, just like that. So again, just exclamation mark and hit tab. And because of something built in called Emmet, it does this for me. Super cool, right? Saves you a little bit of time of typing in just the basics. Now you still have to come in here to the title, and you have to add a title. That's what will show up in the top of the tab in the browser. And also, if you bookmark this page, it'll show up there. So here I would put like portfolio. And again, assuming that this is your index.html page, this is your root page for your portfolio for this class. Okay. And then inside the body tag, you typically have 3 different tags, right? You have a header tag, and you have a main tag, and you have a footer. And these are just common tags that you'll have. You might have one more called nav, and that's where you would put your overall navigation for your portfolio. Okay. I'm going to focus on this a little bit tonight, just to help you guys get set up with some navigation. Remember that in this class, we don't really care about websites being responsive. We don't look at them in a large view, in a medium view, and a small view like we did in 230. The 230 class. This class is just focused on that mobile view. So inside of here, I've got portfolio, and maybe inside the, I'm just going to add inside of here maybe an H1 tag that says portfolio, something that we can see in the browser. Maybe in the footer down here, I don't know. I'm going to add a copyright symbol. And the way I do that, I can do just the ampersand and copy, the word copy. That's called an HTML entity. And there's a whole bunch of HTML entities, and they basically are symbols that show up on your web page. And that one right there will give me a C with the circle around it for the copyright symbol. And then maybe I just put in the year and a pipe. I'll separate it with a pipe. I'll put in portfolio and maybe Brother Thane here. Something like that in the footer would be nice, right? So let's say I'm ready to look at this in the browser. What you should have installed in VS Code is an extension called Live Server. And I'm going to show you how to install that really quick. But you come down here to this icon that looks like building blocks. You click it once, and in here you can search for extensions. These they're just add-ons to VS Code, and there's hundreds and thousands of these that developers have created to make our lives easier. And what I'm going to show you is the one you should definitely have for sure is called Live Server, and it's right here. So if you just come in here and you type in Live Server, you'll find it. It's right here. It's made by Ritwig Day, and you can see there's been over 5 million downloads. So it's a popular extension. And you just click the install button. And once you do that, you'll have access to this Live Server feature that I'm going to show you. So definitely you want that. The other one I'd probably recommend that you get is called Beautify. So if you just come back to here and you type in Beautify, it's this one right here by Hooky QR. Over 4 million downloads. So another popular one. And this really just helps beautify your code so that it looks nice. Once you get those two installed, what you can do when you come back to your file is I can now right click on this file and I can say open with Live Server. And what that's going to do is it's going to start up a development server on my local machine and then launch this whatever file I clicked on. Okay, so in this case, it's going to open up my sample. In your case, it'll be your index.html file. And there it is. Right, so it's actually running a web server on my local machine, and I'm good to go. I'm gonna try to come over this way. I've got some light coming through a blind over there. So there we go. And what's really cool about running Live Server is if I'm in my code, I'm gonna split the screen here. But if I'm in my code, then I want to make some changes. Let's say I come over here and I add Brother Thane's portfolio. I spell my name right. Anytime you make a change to a file in VS Code, you're going to see it. This little icon up here turns into a circle. And that just lets you know that you've got some pending changes that aren't saved yet. So watch what happens over here. As soon as because I'm running live server, as soon as I do Command or Control S to save it, you'll see that this will automatically refresh over here. Kind of cool, right? So that I can be over here developing code, and all I have to do is save it, and I can then test it over here on the side. So that works out really nice. So this is great, but over time, I'm going to have a bunch of weeks, right? I want to be able to distinguish between week 1, week 2, week 3. And as I mentioned, I only care about looking at this portfolio in the mobile view. That's all we're going to target in this class. So if I go into inspect and I click this little icon right here, it's going to turn on this mobile view and let me see this application that we're building in the mobile view. That's how I'm going to look at your portfolio every week. Okay, is in this mobile view. So you don't have to worry again about it being responsive and looking good on all the different sizes. Okay. So you look at that and you go, yeah, that's kind of cool. And over here in the dropdown, I can look at it in a responsive view where I can then take and move it back and forth. In this class, I'm not going to do that because I don't care about being responsive. I'm just going to pick one of these that I want to see it in. I'm going to pick iPhone. And if you want to see this little container around there, that's kind of fun. You just show the device frame. You click this little icon, these little 3 dots, and say show device frame, and that gives you a little frame around your so you can kind of see what it might look like on an iPhone. You can pick other things. There's a bunch of others. There's a Moto G4. That's what that looks like. There's a Galaxy. Not everyone has a frame, and so you'll have to find one that has a frame if you care about that. But that's just an example, okay? All right, I know I'm flying through this. Let me know if you've got questions, just stop me. I am recording this and I'll post the recording afterwards as well. So if you need to go back and look at anything that we've done, you can do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back into full screen here, just kind of get more real estate. What I wanna show you is how to set up a menu that's mobile, kind of a mobile first menu. And the reason I say mobile first, that's a design concept that we designed first for this mobile screen. And the reason we do that is that's over half the world looks at your website with mobile device, not with desktop or a laptop or a tablet even. And so really when we do anything in this class, we want to say, hey, let's make it look good on the mobile phone and not worry about anything else. Later on, you can add additional content for bigger screens, right? But in this one, I want to do a menu that shows up here to link to all my different weeks for the class. So one thing really common to do that is you have this nav. It's an HTML5 tag called nav. It's for your main navigation on your site. And inside of that, it's super common to have menu items that are under a UL tag, an unordered list tag. So I just type in UL and I hit tab, and then I can hit enter. And then I want to create a list item for every menu link, okay? Inside of that, I want an anchor tag. And so I'm just going to type in an A and hit tab. And in this case, I don't want it to go anywhere. So I'm going to type in a pound right here that just says, hey, this isn't going to go anywhere. And what I want to show you is I can use another HTML entity. Again, it starts with ampersand, just like down here with a copy. Only this one's called equiv with a semicolon. And that's going to give us that little menu icon that you see a lot with 3 lines, 3 horizontal lines on top of each other. And then next to that, I might go ahead and add the word menu. The nice thing about that is if people aren't familiar with that little icon, at least if you have the word menu too, that's helpful, right? So if I save that and I go back to our browser, you're seeing that show up. That's our first link. Well, that's awesome, right? And then I'm gonna add another LI with another A. For now, I'm just gonna put a pound sign. Pound sign doesn't go anywhere when you click it, it just stays. But it's a nice placeholder. And in here, I'm gonna say, I wanna go to week 1. Okay. And I've got a couple weeks over here build out. I've got up through week 6 build out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and I think I'm just going to copy this down. And let me show you a couple things. If I hold down the shift and I click the alt tag, it lets me copy these down. That's kind of fun. And that's quick. I can just come in here and change these really quick. So alt, again, shift alt and then arrow will copy whatever line you're on. If you need to do that, just little tidbits here as we go along. And let's see how that's looking. Well, there we go. We got a nice little menu that's showing up, right? If I blow that up so you can see it, you can see it's kind of coming out nice. By default, we have these little dots, not so attractive in the menu. So we want to get rid of those. So let me show you how to do that. what I recommend you do is have a style subfolder, like I mentioned, and I've already got one in here called main. I would call mine main or something like that. I'm going to call this one sample tonight, just because I'm going to call everything sample tonight, just to kind of step you through it. And I'm going to throw this over on this side. You can split your screen in VS Code, which is nice. And what I want to do is just basically, I want to get rid of those dots. And the way I can do that is with just a selector, a CSS selector that targets the UL tag. And I'm going to get more specific and say, I'm going to target a UL tag that's a child of a nav, so that I make sure that later on, if I have other unordered lists, they don't get affected by this style right here. And what I want to say is, don't show the dots. So there's a property called list style, and I'm just going to set that to none. And just by doing that, well, let me tell you, I don't have a link yet to this style sheet, right? So what I've got to do is inside the head tag, I want to type in link and hit tab, and that sets up kind of the tag for us. And then over here, I'm going to just say, I'm inside my styles subfolder, and I hit tab, and then it looks inside that folder for me, VS Code does, and says, which file do you want? You can use the up and down arrow. And I'm going to choose the sample. Again, yours will be called something else. But that links this HTML over to my CSS. A lot of this might be a review for you guys. I'm just showing you kind of from scratch, right? So once I link those two together, I see that, yeah, sure enough, that got rid of the dots that were over here, right? Kind of cool. Some other things I probably want to do. You can see that by default, if it's kind of indented over here, this menu. It's kind of indented. I don't really like that so well. And so we want to make some changes with that. And the way you can do that, if on this tag right here, I can set the margin to 0 and the padding to 0. And if I save that and go back, you can see it pulled it right over. And that's kind of what I want. I don't want it hanging out in the middle. Here's another thing I want to do. Let me get down to nav ul lis. I'm going to change these a little bit up. I'm going to show just a border to kind of show you where one starts and one ends for now. You can kind of see that that's how they lay out. But notice that if I click over here, I don't really go anywhere, because the link is only this big. And so what I want to do is I'm going to kind of show you down here. I want to make sure that these links take up the full width, so that, you know, when you're on your device and you're trying to click that link, you have a little bit bigger target. So I'm actually going to change the display on this to, it's normally an inline display, and I'm going to change it to block, so that it takes up the full width here. And that'll be nice. That'll be helpful. Let me go back to this. This is what it should be looking like without zooming in. So you can tell I'm kind of taking up the whole room, but it's also kind of hard to click. So I'm gonna add some padding in here to kind of make it a little bit taller, a little bit wider. Some other things I don't really like. I don't really want the underlines inside of those links. So I'm going to change the text decoration to none. Oops, go back and spell that right. And that'll get rid of the links, right, with the underlines. So I think we're getting a little closer to maybe what you want. You can also get more creative here, and you can say, maybe I don't want a border that's that strong. And notice I'm kind of putting these in alphabetical order. That's just kind of what I do. Keep things kind of simple. I'm just going to throw a light yellow. Maybe we'll do a light blue around the background of that. And now this black looks a little bit sharp, so maybe I'll just change that to blue, so I get a little bit of difference, I don't know, inside of that. That's not a bad menu. Now here's the problem. That menu takes up a lot of space, and as we get to weeks 9, 10, 11, 12, my whole mobile app is going to be a list of menu items. So not super great, right? So what I want to do is I want to go in there and say, hey, don't show me all of these by default, okay? Make it something that's a little bit easier to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this nav ul li, and by default, I'm going to tell it to not show any of these. So I'm going to set the display to none. And you look at that and it goes away. Not exactly what we wanted. I do want that first menu to show up, that very first list item. I want that one to show up. I just don't want the rest of them to show up unless I click on the menu. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another selector, nav ul li, and it has what we call a pseudo element, if you remember, and it's called first child. And on that one, I'm going to set the display to block. And what that will do, that one's more specific than this one. So even though here we close this off, I'm going to go ahead and set this first child to be display block. And what that will do is it'll make that visible, okay? Not bad, right? We're getting there. But we do want to be able to click that and actually have it do something, right? So let me show you how you do that. What we want to do is link to a script. This is going to require some JavaScript on our part, okay? So just like we did here with the styles, I'm going to go over to my scripts folder, and I'm going to add a sample .js file. And the very first thing I want to do here is I want to link it, so I don't forget to do that again, like I did with the style sheet. And the way you link a script is you just come down right before the closing body tag and you type in script. And it has a source attribute. And again, I'm going to choose from my scripts folder. And in this case, I'm just going to grab my sample file for tonight. Okay, yours will be called something else, main or whatever you want to call it. And right now it doesn't do anything. But you always put that right before the closing body tag. And that allows all the rest of your HTML to load before you load up the JavaScript file. Best practice. So what I want to do is I want to create some kind of a function in here that's going to be called when I click that menu item. And typically when you declare a function, you call it something that is meaningful, right? So I'm going to use the function keyword. There's 3 ways to declare a function. This is one way. I just use the keyword function and then toggle menu. And because it's a function, it has parentheses at the end. And then I enclose the body, the block, we call that a block, in between curly braces. And now I can say what I want to do. And really what I want to do is I want to reach out to this this UL right here, and I want to add or remove a class from there to show the children of that. So I'm going to add an ID over there to get hold of it, and I'm just going to call it navigation. And then I want to do one more thing here. I want to actually give an ID of menu to the first anchor tag here, this first menu link. So I've done 2 things. I've given IDs to the UL and also to that an ID to that first menu item. And let me save that. And then what I want to do in this function is I want to go out and grab, I'm going to do a document.query selector. And I want to go out and grab this ID, right? The element with this ID. So to do that, I'm going to have to add the pound sign because it's an ID I'm looking for plus the name. And once I have access to that, what I want to do is I want to go to the class list that's included in that, and I want to do something called toggle. And it's a method, so it's got parentheses like a function. And what I want to toggle is a class called open. I'll just call it open for now. What that'll do is every time we call this function, it's going to reach out to this UL tag, and it's going to add or remove a class called open, okay? And we'll see that here in action in just a second. So the next thing I want to do is I've got to have some way to call this function, okay? So you've really got 2 choices at this point. Let me save that. I've got this choice that I can come right into the HTML, and I can add an on-click event, and I can have it, I can have it call toggle menu. That function that we wrote, right? I can have it call that right from inside my HTML. I can put a link there into the JavaScript. That's how we did it in 230. But what I want to show you is we're trying to take it to the next level. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to even mess with my HTML, right? It should just be the HTML. That's it. So what I can do instead of that is I can reach in here and I can attach this event to this item. And here's how I do it. I do document dot either get element by ID. And if you do that one, you can say navigation. Or actually, I want to target the menu. That's where I'm trying to attach this event. So you can do document.get element by ID, or you can do what we did up above with query selector. That's probably the preferred one, because now it's not just by ID. I can search by an HTML snippet, an element. I can search by even a class. But what you have to remember to do is if you're going to do query selector, you've got to add a pound if it's an ID. And then I'm basically looking for this menu, this anchor tag right here with an ID of menu, okay? And then what I want to do with that is I want to add an event listener. And if inside of VS Code, I can just hit a dot and it brings up this add event listener. That's kind of cool. And that's a method, so I've got to use the parentheses. And inside of this, it says, what event do you want to attach to that HTML element? And I want to attach the click event. And notice it's not on click like it was in the HTML. It's just click. And then I say, well, what function do you want to call when that event happens? And I'm just going to call toggle menu. And notice I don't want to add the parentheses there. I'm just trying to put a link from this function to this function up here. And so I want to just end it like that. So what I've done is inside of my JavaScript file, I've reached into my HTML and I've added a click event to this element right here, right? And what that should do is it should either add this class or remove the class. That's what the toggle function does. It adds it if it's not there. If it's there, it removes it. So this is kind of fun. I can come in here now and I can actually, I'm going to blow this up full screen to show you. And let me make this a lot bigger so you can actually see it. And what I want to do now is I'm going to show you this body tag in this nav, this UL. So now if I click on this menu button, what should happen is this UL tag right here should get a class added to it. And if I click the menu, you see that open up over here? Class equals open. If I click it again, it goes away. So the toggle menu is working great, right? It's adding that class. Now nothing's happening down here yet. Okay, the reason is I don't have a class in my CSS called open yet. That's the last part of this to make it work. So it's adding the class or removing the class correctly. So we're almost there. What I'm going to do in my CSS, I'll throw that in here as well, is I'm just going to come down here and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll separate these selectors by, I'll call these HTML selectors, and then I'll have maybe some class selectors down here. And I'll just put them in these categories so I can find them quicker. And then maybe I have some ID selectors at the very bottom. And so in this case, I want a class selector, and I'm going to call it open. And inside of here, what I want to do is basically undo this nav ul li display none. So I'm just going to say, hey, when there's a class called open on a nav tag, their li items should be display block, not none. They should be display block. And by just doing that, when I come over here and I click this now, I see my menu open and shut. And now I can link, later on we'll link to the different folders in here, right? So not bad, right?
Yeah, nice. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, of course, Mark.
jQuery, is jQuery allowed, or is that frowned on in this class?
Yeah, it's actually frowned on a little bit. After this class, if you go on to take the 430 class, we have you use a bunch of different things. One of them is Bootstrap for CSS, and we have you learn Angular, which is a framework. It's kind of like the jQuery library, only much bigger, you know. But yeah, for this class, it's still doing it the hard way, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
So yeah, some of these document dots I'm sure are driving you crazy if you know jQuery, right? It's so much easier to just do, you know, the $ and then the selector, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, if you know that, you know, do definitely use it in industry. It saves you time. And in that list that I showed you from Stack Overflow, jQuery is right up on the top when it comes to libraries and stuff like that.
Right. Now,
yeah.
Just a quick question on like style for our functions, our JavaScript function. I like including the keyword function. Sometimes, like, I don't naturally do that. I'll just put the function selector. Is that allowed? Or
yeah. So let me show. No, you can do it. There's actually 3 ways to build a function. Let me show you a couple other ways. So I can do it like this. Another option you have is to declare a variable called like toggle menu, and then you can set this equal to a function. That's one way. The most modern way to do it right now is to get rid of this and add a arrow like this. That's the preferred way to do it now. Gotcha. Okay. So if you're used to that way, using the arrow function, that's the preferred way, and then you're good to go. It looks a lot like the other ones. If you have to pass in, we haven't really talked tonight about arguments getting passed in as parameters to a function, but those would go in here. Like if I was going to pass a name, maybe a couple names, right? I could pass those in there in that list, and then I could use them inside the block, the code block. But either way,
because of the ES6, right?
Right. Okay. Right. And that's the arrow syntax. It's called.
Okay.
The other one. So one's a function declaration. That's the first one we did. This one, the other one's a function expression where you have the const and then equals the function, the name function. But we can leave that out if we just use this arrow syntax. We don't have to even put the word function in there. And this has taken over quite a bit with ES6, the latest version of JavaScript. So we can leave it like that, test it, make sure it still works, and we're good. Always make sure you check this console when you're doing JavaScript, right? Any kind of development on the front end. We're gonna get very familiar with the development tools over here by the time we're done. Okay, let me show you, let's actually link this over to the first week. I've got an index file inside of each one of these weeks. And the reason is if it's called index.html, I can just put a link to the folder and I don't have to specify the name of the file. So it makes things a little bit easier. So I'm gonna come back to my sample. And in this case, I'm just gonna go out to week 1 and that's it. And week 2, and like I said, in this case, I've got an index file in each one of these already. I kind of did that before. But I can just come out here to these different folders and they'll automatically open up now. So if I go over to week 1, you'll see that I come into week 1. There's a sample. I'll kind of show you guys that tonight. If I go back, I can go back into week 2. There's my week 2. But inside of each week, like I said, you'll have your notes from your reading, code examples that you want to save, links to your team assignment, links to your individual assignment, that kind of thing. But really, this portfolio is for you guys, right? You should think of this as something that you could show a potential employer, right, in a job interview, and say, yeah, let me show you a portfolio I did for some of my work in a web front end class. Definitely works great. Inside of that folder, again, you can have whatever you want to have in here. I showed a sample in here. Notice I've got a separate scripts subfolder under week 1, and so I've got my menu. I've got some notes in here about maybe something I read about local storage that I think is cool. I used a code element to kind of wrap some sample code in so I can see it in my HTML. But then I could also take some of that and I could use that as a sample inside of a script file. So I've got a week1.js file in there and I can actually just go ahead and run this. I want to show you this really quick. I wish we had more time. We haven't had a time to even sync this up to GitHub yet. But this is how local storage works. You'll read about it. I'm going to leave this up here in the video so you guys can come back and look at it. There's 2 different ways to set items inside of local storage. You can call .setItem on this local storage object, and the very first value you pass is the key, and the next one is the value that gets stored. The other way to do it is just with a dot. Local storage dot, and then I can give it a name, set it equal to a value. Either way, we'll store these 2 values in local storage, and I'll show you in the browser here. And then to read them back, same thing. I can set a value, like say first name, a variable called first name, to local storage.getItem, and I'm just going to pull this first name back. And the same thing with last name. I can do .last name, and that'll read the value that's stored in there called last name, which I set right up here. I'm sorry, right up here. And then I'm just going to log these out to the console. So let me show you what this looks like. If I come over to my browser tools, and again, I'm just right-clicking here, and I'm just going into inspect. You may not have ever seen this before, but if you come over all the way over, you're going to get to one called application. And inside application, if you open up local storage, it'll show you the things that have been stored here. So for now, that's going to show me really big here. Let me pull this down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the keys that are in there. So I can just delete those with the browser. Just right-click and delete. And then what I want to do is I want to open up this page, this week 1 that has this code in it, okay? And watch what happens. As soon as I open that code up, you'll see that these keys got added. First name is the name of the key. The value is Tim, my first name. Last name is the other key with my last name. And I'm also reading those back and dumping them to the console. So you can see here that I'm dumping these to the console. So there's a little bit about local storage, right? And you would just literally, every time you start doing some of the reading for the week, just have this open, right? Have that week's index file and just come in here and start adding notes like you would in a Word doc or anything else, right? The nice thing about this is you're going to be able to eventually go back and read your notes right inside your app, right? And you can show it to show off. And I'm going to want to see it, obviously. Every week you're going to put a link to your portfolio. We've got 4 minutes left. Let me show you really quick how to get this onto GitHub, which is where you want to eventually have it on, okay? You want to be able to come out to your GitHub account. And if you don't have a GitHub account, just create one. They're free. Make sure you get a free account. And then you can create a repository. Think of a repository as just a project. Okay. So I can click new, and I've already got one called the same thing as my project called WDD 330. So I don't know. We'll just put a one called WDD 330. What's that?
Nothing. I'm just being goofy.
Okay. I was going to call it sample, but I think I have one out there already called that. So I'll just do WD 330 sample or something like that. Once I create that repository, whether you make it private or public is up to you. If it's public, anyone can see your code. If it's private, only you can see it. If you do decide to set it to private, make sure you add me as a collaborator. Okay. And to do that, I'll show you really quick. I just create this repository, and I'm going to set it to private to kind of show you. It'll show you right here that it's private if it's a private repository. Just make sure you go into settings, and then you go over here to manage access. It'll ask you for your password, and then you come down here and invite a collaborator. My username in GitHub is just Tim Thane, and if you do that, it'll pop open, and you just say yes, and it'll send me an email to invite me to your repository. So either way, if later you decide you want to change it from public to private, you can come back into settings. You can scroll down here to the bottom, and you can make it public. I'm going to make this public just to kind of show you. It does make you retype your username and the name of the project to make sure you're really meant to. And I'll make it so you can switch between private and public if you want. But what I really care about is when I come back to this repository, I need the URL to link to my repository from my local machine, right? So if I click on right down here, I can either highlight this with my mouse, or I can just click this little copy icon. I'm just going to click the copy icon. And I need to know what that is in order to link my local repository up to the GitHub account. And I promise you that in future office hours, I'll talk more about Git and some of the features of Git and that kind of thing. But what you can do inside of VS Code to link this to a Git repository, there's a couple things. Controller Command J opens up the terminal. And what you first thing you want to do is make sure that your folder is under source control with Git. And if you don't have Git installed, you've got to pop out to git-scm.com and download it right here, okay? Once you download Git and install it, go ahead and you should be able to go into VS Code and go into a command line, and you type in git space init, like a init, git init. And that will initialize your folder to become a Git repository, okay? The next thing you want to do after you've done that is you want to open up the command palette. And the way you do that is you do Controller Command Shift P, and that opens up this command palette. Again, Controller Command Shift P, and then you type in Git, and then this is the one we want to do. We want to add a remote. And it's typical to call this origin, O-R-I-G-I-N. And then after you do that, I've already got one called origin, so I'm going to call mine origin 1. And then the next thing it says is to paste in the URL to your repository, okay? So I'm going to paste that in, and I would hit enter, and that would then link my local repository up to my GitHub account, okay? I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it. If you're not sure if you're linked or not, you can do a command from the command line here, and you just say git remote -v, and that'll show you if you're connected, which repository you're connected to. And that one is already connected up to my WDD 330. So what's cool about this is the cycle goes like this. Once you're connected, you basically want to click this sync button down here the first time. It'll look like a cloud icon. And you want to click that, and it's going to go ahead and push all these new files up to your GitHub repository, okay? After you do that the first time, what you'll do is you'll go through this cycle where you make changes to your files, and then when you do that, every file that you change, the number will increment up here. So this shows me that I've got 3 files in this little icon here that are waiting to be pushed up to my GitHub account. So I just click that. It says, okay, I've got to type in a message. And by the way, you can click on any one of these and see the changes that you made. Okay, these are all brand new files, so there's really nothing over here. But you could look and see what you changed if you want to know. I type in a message, added samples for demo, or whatever we want to call this. And then you do this every time, right? You click this, type in a message, and you click this little check mark. So I click the little check mark, and now I've committed locally to my GitHub repository, right? If I want to sync these changes up to my GitHub account, I click this little, just like you did the first time when it's a cloud, you click this, and this is showing you've got one outgoing commit. And that number will go up or down depending on how many you've got left. And now I can go over to my GitHub account. I'm going to actually get back to my GitHub, see if I can find it. I didn't connect it to this, so let me go back to WDD 330, and I should be able to see these files in there. There's my WDD 330, and I added some samples, and so now you see the sample file we worked on, and there we go. So there's one last thing you got to do. I know we're out of time. Let me show you one last thing to turn this into a web server. Basically, I don't want to just see the source file, right? That's cool, but I just want to see this as I would see it on my local machine. So what you do is you come into this, go back into your repository and click on the settings tab one more time. And by the way, this is in the instructions also for setting up the portfolio. That activity has these instructions. You just come down here to the kind of towards the bottom, and you'll see this GitHub Pages link, okay? And what you want to do is change this from none, which will be the default, and change it to master branch. And what this does is it turns it into a GitHub, what we call a GitHub Pages website that you can see inside the browser, and it'll actually serve it up as a web server would. So if I want to see source code, I go to this, my github.com/my username/the project name, and I see the source code. But if I want to see this inside of like a browser window, what I want to do is change the URL here to my username.github.io instead of .com / the name of the project, and hit enter. And notice now it's going to return it back as a web page. So now I have access in here to go in here and run this as I would locally. And that's the link you'd want to submit every week, okay? If you've got your notes submitted in your portfolio every week, you're going to stay on top of it. If you wait till the end to try to get all of your different files together, it'll be a lot of work. And so what I recommend is every week, just add notes and code examples and links to your other assignments under each one of these weeks. Inside of this one, I could have a link to anything, right, that I want to show in here. Really, this is for you guys, right? This is to help you remember how to do things that you learn throughout the semester, so that when you go and you build your two projects, you'll be able to have some notes that you can turn to, and even code examples that you can just drag and drop in there. Okay, I know I went 100 miles an hour. A lot to cover this first week. Any questions? Okay. Don't forget that you can set up some time with me to schedule it through my Calendly. I'm happy to meet with you. Jump on the developer forum, that discussion group in iLearn, and I'll set up teams like I talked about right after we're done tonight. Let me look through here really quick. Yeah, so this week, all you're turning in is your readings from week 1. So whatever you read this week, whatever you learned, and then any code examples. And literally, guys, your code examples can come from the book. I've got this open, right? So let me see if I've got it open, wherever I've got it open. I might like some of this code example. So I just go, yeah, I want to definitely borrow some of that. I'm going to store that in my repository, right? So maybe I go out and grab some. I'm looking for some JavaScript. It's all HTML. But anyway, you get the idea. I can just hover over some of this and grab it. If this was JavaScript, right, I could just highlight some of this and pull it off of here. If it's W3 schools I liked, and I said, oh yeah, this is great, I'm going to go to try it yourself, and I'm just going to say, yeah, I want to have this available as a sample in my portfolio. I'm fine with that. It doesn't have to be code examples that you wrote. It can be, but it can also just be stuff that you find that you like. Okay. Anything that will help you remember how to do this, so that by the time you get done, you can go back and review and be ready for your to use some of this with your own project that you do. The last 4 or 5 weeks, we just have you build a project that you want to build. You come up with the idea and all that. We'll get into this much later. So the first several weeks of this is just adding to your portfolio, your notes, your code examples. You do your team project every week. You post a link to that. And then by the time you're done, you have a nice little portfolio. Okay, any other questions? Okay, guys. Sorry we went over. I try not to do that. Thanks for your patience. Again, I'll post this recording up here as soon as it processes. Takes about an hour, and then you'll see an invite into Teams. Makes it really quick. You can communicate with me through that as well. And I'm online all day, every day, so I'm usually pretty quick to respond that way as well. So thanks for joining. You guys are awesome. Hopefully things are going well for you, and we'll talk to you next week. Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining.
It was great. Thanks.
You bet.
Have a good night, Brother Thane.
Okay. See you, Ryan. See you guys.